Very good. Okay. Firstly, I would agree wholeheartedly with what my colleague was saying, and it's actually a very nice segue into this presentation. What I'm going to do my best to focus on in the 30 minutes or so that we have is give you a bit of background on what the market is doing. So I won't spend too much time on that because my colleague has already covered that fairly well. But from a publisher's point of view, how do you make money out of mobile? Now, I'm certainly not an expert, and I'm not going to ask you to pay me €500 an hour because I will not be telling you the truth. But I can share with you some of the experiences that I have. Very briefly, won't bore you with my background too much, but I had my own technology company for 5 or 6 years. I sold that in 2005. It's listed on the ASX, turned over about $35 million, and I was general manager of a large newspapers digital business running the news and classified businesses. And for the past couple of years, I've had my own media companies, and one of those businesses that I look after in the Asia-Pacific region is Gumiyo. So we're going to go through the important thing is to understand who is your audience. Now, in 30 minutes, it's not possible for me to cover every single country here and who uses what, but I'll give you some general information and at least hopefully a path that you can consider. And the one takeaway that I hope you get from this is perhaps a strategic view on how you might undertake your mobile strategy. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve with you. And before I go to the next slide, I do appreciate that there are other really important events on at this point in time. And Felix actually declined an invitation to the royal wedding. So thank you, Felix, for coming and watching my presentation instead of the wedding. Very briefly, some of what Gumiyo does is we have a mobile platform that enables publishers to produce websites that render to 2,000 different handsets automatically, including images and video. So we can make video essentially work on any feature phone or smartphone within reason that actually have the capabilities to play video. A sample of our customers across the world. In Australia, we deal with the 3 biggest digital media companies, Fairfax News Limited and Mitchell Communications. There's a couple of logos we don't have up here, but Tribune Group and Media News Group in the US. Compass Gramedia, which is the largest publisher in Indonesia. Taleo, which globally I think is one of the largest human resource software companies. Cars Guide, which is News Limited. Singapore Press Holdings, we've just done a deal with the Singapore government to do a directory for that nation. So we've got a bit of experience that we can share with you and explain how some of these clients are making money. Now that's fairly light, but basically this is, you already know this, the evolution of media is really quite simple, print, digital to mobile. And those players that have strong digital assets are perfectly placed to capitalise on the mobile market. Why mobile? Well, it's becoming blindingly obvious. For the first time, I think, in history, media companies or publishers have consumers with billions of devices capable of receiving your content. And last quarter was the first time that smartphones actually outsold PCs. So the audience is slowly drifting. They're not going away. They're just using different ways of accessing your content. So depending on the stats that you read, and no one can predict the future, but Morgan & Stanley say sometime between 2012 late up to 2014, the mobile web will surpass the PC-based web. So if you don't have a mobile solution in place, potentially half of your audience is not going to be able to access your content. And the majority of websites in the world today are not mobile friendly. You can potentially look at some of them on a smartphone and move the content around, but to have a truly memorable user experience, it's critical to have a separate development path for your mobile sites that will work on the various handsets. And the number one thing for each of your each region is different. In some regions, say Singapore, iPhones are absolutely dominant. In other regions like Indonesia, the Motorola just talking to Ross from Junkmail yesterday, and surprisingly, BlackBerry is huge in South Africa. So each country, each region is different. So before embarking on your strategy, just consider what your local audience is. What are your consumers? What are your customers using? How do they access content? Are they more app-driven or are they more mobile web? But I guess the important thing is, like the print companies that didn't move quickly into digital, those that have strong digital assets that don't move into mobile, are potentially going to suffer a decline. Now, you can have a copy of this presentation, so I don't expect you to read this. There's no pop quiz. But around the world, feature phones are still a very large part of the market, and they will be for a period of time. So I would agree with my colleague that the people with smartphones are the ones that probably will look more at the mobile web, but there's still a huge audience, particularly on Nokias, that look at the mobile web for news content, social media, etc. So I don't think that's an audience sector that can be ignored. And smartphones are catching up pretty quickly. Okay. Now, depending on the region you're in, it could be 30% penetration, 31% in Europe. Young people love smartphones. Here's a breakdown. I'm not sure if you can see all the detail there. But depending on the country, you can see the differences in smartphone penetration, and also the gender differences. So in India, for example, it's heavily male skewed. In the US, it's the other way around. Females are more likely to have an iPhone, and men and women are different. In fact, they're really different, but that's a completely different presentation. We'll cover it another time. This is a typical Australian internet user. As it's important to do research, I thought I would share that with you. Is that a serious question? I'm not sure. So in Australia, currently, you can do the maths on that. Mobile broadband is growing at a much greater rate. Landlines are dropping. More and more people that have homes now don't bother with a landline. They just have a phone, a mobile phone. Covering Europe as well. Now, these are stats you're probably all familiar with. But I guess the upshot of it is, it doesn't matter which company you're looking at the moment. They're all doing pretty well. If you can get 115% growth in Apple, and even RIM, BlackBerry, grew 65%. That astounds me, but they did. And Palm, I didn't think they were still in business, but apparently they grew as well. And there are 8.7 million Android users in Europe. So you've got a massive audience that you can tap into. In the US, for our colleagues who have travelled there, and Robert Haig is actually a great customer of ours in the US, 228 million mobile subscribers, and sometime this year it's predicted that smartphones will overtake feature phones. And again, no one can predict the future, but at the current growth rate, it's going to happen sooner than later. And again, this is just one market sector, so I won't go into huge detail. I'll get to the commercial bit, but you can see there that in the US market, iPhones are about 28%. So maybe 1 in 10 consumers has an iPhone. So my point there is that, again, completely agreeing with my colleague, it's important not to go too heavy and spend a lot of money on developing applications for devices where you don't necessarily know what your market's going to do. As best you can, be as agnostic as you can in the beginning, get feedback from the market, and then pursue a course of action with more vigour, would be my strongest suggestion from the experience we've had with our customers. And again, depending on your demographics, who you're trying to reach. Apple dominates under 44, BlackBerry still over 45 is more dominant. Half of the Android users are under 35, younger generation. Okay, so we get that, everyone gets that, mobile is growing and it's going to be big. So do you need apps or mobile web? Which way do you go? So let's have a look. And look, this is a very, very high level view. I know there's a workshop tomorrow which will go into a lot more detail on this, but essentially the key differences between the native applications and the mobile web, They're device specific. So each time you develop an application, you're developing for multiple platforms. And you might do 2, you might do 3, you might do more. Some of the basic differences from a user experience perspective, you're going to get a sharper finish. You're going to have some features on there that are going to, you can get on an application that you can't on the mobile web. It will require custom development, and you've got a registration process to go through. It can be costly to deploy and maintain. It doesn't need to be, but it can be if you don't do your specification right up front, and it can be a very expensive exercise, and I'll get into the costs of that later. But applications are extremely popular. There's no question about that. The mobile web, consumers are consumers. Consumers still go to the browser on their phone to look for content, and Google, that people still go to the mobile phone, type in Google, and get information. It's not as feature-rich as a native application, and the user interface may not be as polished as an application, but still more than serviceable. There's less development time, depending, of course, on the platform. Now, there are a range of platforms in the world that you could potentially look at. There are groups like us. There are other groups that have platforms that focus more on smartphones, and there are, so just consider that with your strategy. It's generally less development time because you can reuse your existing digital assets, which again I'll come to. And the beauty of the mobile web is that you're reaching both feature phone and smartphone users. Yep. A bit more geeky stuff here. This is, again, pretty high level. These are some of the things, some of the minor differences, but what people may or may not know, some of the features that can be supported on the mobile web: GPS location, offline mode, self-adjusting UI. The things that are only possible in apps at this point in time are the sort of augmented reality type applications, scanning, those sort of nice top-end features which are only possible in apps, as well as address book integration, near-field communication, etc. I guess this is important to understand. Well, that's great, but what do people actually use apps for? Well, 70% of the chart-topping apps are games, and that's where the bulk of the revenue is. So don't go thinking that you're going to make a mozza by building apps. You're not. That's not what they're used for at this point in time. And if you look down what comes second, third, and fourth, you'll find that it's things like news, weather, sport are the next major applications that consumers use. That's pretty scary, isn't it? 2.8 hours per day on average in social media. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're looking at classified content. But interestingly, 60% of smartphone users do turn to apps first. So slightly more than half will look to an app to see if they can get what they want before they turn to the mobile web. What do people surf the mobile web for? The picture of the surfer is probably completely lost on everybody, so it's a very poor attempt at lightening the mood. But funnily enough, people use the mobile web for the same sorts of things. Social media is the dominant reason that people use the mobile web. But the scary stat, and I should have put the source there, but this is a piece of research. Half of the audience, if they come to your site and it's not mobile friendly, they will not come back. Okay? They don't. So you have a limited window of opportunity. And what I can show you when I show you the stats, these are real stats from clients later, that a huge amount of your audience will bookmark your site if it's good and come back to it on a regular basis. Those companies too, and we deal with some large ones that have in excess of 120 million page views for classifieds. And on the mobile side, where they've got ordinary sites, their page views have stayed at about 1 million a month for the last 12 months. Zero growth. And that's just evidence that the consumers are not happy with what they're doing on the mobile front. Okay, so getting into some case studies. These are real customers. REA is the Real Estate Institute of Western Australia. Western Australia is on the west coast of Australia. It's a great place to live. We deployed a mobile site for these guys in 2009. Can you see that graph? I didn't pick very good colours. Can you see the general shape of it? Yeah. All they have done is zero promotion. They haven't marketed it at all. It is purely organic traffic. Now, what we've done for them is put a piece of code in the home page of their website so that when a consumer goes to their browser on their mobile phone and types in www. You can do that on your phone now if you like, it's up to you. And what you'll notice is that it will automatically detect your handset and then send you the appropriate version of the site, images, etc., properly sized for your handset. And it won't matter what you've got. You could have a 4-year-old Nokia. It'll work on that. And in that very short space of time, mobile is now 15% of their traffic, and that's without any promotion at all. And more than a third of their traffic is referred from Google. So consumers not necessarily wanting to find REWA, they're looking for properties, going to Google, getting a high search result through their SEO, and then being redirected. It's about a third, so it's reasonably significant. But look what happened when someone turned the lights off. Now, these guys redid their website about 10 weeks or so ago now, and the guy in charge of development thought, well, we'll just take the automatic handset detection redirection code out. And they lost 90% of their traffic overnight, 9-0. Well, that's a good question. I'm reading your mind. He did keep his job, but by the skin of his teeth, yeah. Because it takes a long time to build that sort of traffic up, as you guys well know, and it can potentially be blown overnight. But that growth is still, going phenomenally well. Now, I'll help you out here with, you probably can't read all that information, but just illustrating the point that smartphone users, as well as really loving applications, do use the mobile web. So with REWA, you can see there's 1 million page views or so for the last 4 months. I would say the blue bit is iPhone. So 75% of the consumers coming to the site are going through Safari on the iPhone. And where their traffic's coming from, you look at the blue bit is direct. That's what's been bookmarked. This is consumers saving it as favourites and then just coming straight back to the site. The red component is consumers for the first time coming in, typing the URL. And the yellow section is what's being referred from Google. Yeah. And they do not have an iPhone app at all. So I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just a case example. Now, this is a custom we have in Malaysia. iProperty Malaysia. The site was deployed in December 2010. The auto detect was installed on the homepage. They immediately jumped to something like 5,000 page views a day. It's hit as high as 12 or 13, but it's more than doubled in the space of 4 months. And again, you can see the user base is growing quite nicely as well. Now this one I think you're going to be interested in. I can't reveal who it is, but it is a real client. It's a large national publisher. They have a property app and a very successful one where we're talking about a few 100,000 downloads of this particular app. Their mobile web traffic has been static for approximately a year. We went in there about a year ago and explained a strategy to them which they've taken on board. And what they've done is 2 things, where they're relaunching their mobile site using our technology. But the killer app, the killer solution here is that in addition to the mobile website, we've built individual real estate agent sites for the mobile web for all of their customers. And what they've been able to do is increase their subscription price for their annual contracts by a factor of 10%. And that is generating them, by the end of August into September, they will have done, I've said 2 million here, it's going to be closer to $3 million incremental revenue as a result of that strategy. Now, what we've found is that if you have have a mobile solution. Even if you took this same solution, an individual real estate agent site with their properties, their details, etc., and you tried to sell that as a standalone solution, you're going to get 2 or 3, maybe 5% of your customers take it up. Why? They don't have it now. It's not hurting them. They don't need it. It's an extra line item of money they've got to pay you. Whereas if you bundle it into your solution, your existing subscription price or your existing upsell process, the take-up rate, it just becomes part of your existing service. And that's the solution that we're pushing with our publishers, and it's going very well. The other thing that it does, it locks in your customers, and you are essentially taking a land grab on the market. Budget consideration for applications. Look, I couldn't tell you how much an app's going to cost you until we sat down and did a spec. We've done them anything from a few $1,000s. The most expensive one is $500,000 for a particular news group. So it really depends on what the requirements are. It can be time-consuming to deploy. It might not be, again, depending on your requirements. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution for applications. But understand that if you're developing for different devices, you've got different development paths and timelines for each of those. So an option to consider is browser-based apps, where you take the mobile web, essentially feed it into an app shell, and there's your application. Again, go back to what I was saying earlier, there are some disadvantages to that, but there are also some advantages. Mobile web can be implemented fairly quickly. We're talking potentially weeks as opposed to months. These are some of our customers in Africa. The beauty of the mobile web as well, and to some degree it's the same with applications, but you can reuse your existing digital assets. You don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. Okay. Show me the money. This is just sharing our experience over the last couple of years with what we found with our customer base. Reuse your content, feed it into a platform, publish out to multiple, to make it a handset agnostic solution. Where possible, you can use, and we do for most of our customers, use the same feeds for applications as we do mobile web. There is little or no money in banner advertising at this point in time. Certainly not enough to attract media buyers' attention. We do have some customers that are, generating a handful of thousands of dollars, but it's very small. At this point in time, there's little or no money in classified apps. A strategy to consider is the bundling option I spoke about earlier, where you may bundle to have the clients go into your application as well, but that's fraught with dangers, because if you don't put those clients in that don't pay, then your app is less valuable because there's less content. So. But there can be, and we've demonstrated that there can be substantial revenue in bundling mobile web solutions, particularly where you take ownership of the individual client, real estate agent, car dealer, recruiter, their mobile web solution. So get right down into their business. Okay. So here's this is the key message that I was keen to get across was your successful publishers, utilise your existing digital content, create a mobile, an agnostic solution, one which you can reach out to your entire audience of both feature phones and smartphones, and then from there extend that into applications. Get feedback from the market and then pursue it from there. Thank you.